Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
Welcome back. I'm Domenic Rinaldi, host of the M&A Unplugged podcast. Today's episode is a twofer. We're going to talk with a serial entrepreneur, Greg Kihlstrom, about his experience growing a business through acquisition and then selling that same business years later for a much higher multiple. Greg started Carousel 30, which offered web design applications. It was a small business and largely utilized freelancers for specific tasks. Through an acquisition of one of his vendors, Greg not only grew the business, but ultimately wound up developing a niche, building mission-critical web applications for financial services firms. This created a much more valuable business, which Greg then sold years later at a much higher value. Greg shares his experiences from both acquiring and integrating a business into his existing operation and how he methodically prepared the business for an eventual sale. I know you'll gain some valuable insights from hearing Greg's journey. I hope you enjoy our podcast. If so, please take a moment to subscribe and review our show. We really appreciate it. And by subscribing, you will be notified of new episodes and the bonus episodes we plan to release in the near future. In the meantime, if you have questions about buying or selling a business or need to better understand the process, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly at drinaldi@sunacquisitions.com. I am committed to helping you avoid the common pitfalls so you can maximize value and minimize risks. Thank you for being here, and I know you're going to get a ton out of today's episode. Hey, Greg, welcome to M&A Unplugged.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited to have you. It's rare that I get to have somebody on the show that has hit both of the major categories that we like to talk about, growing through acquisition and then actually building up your business and selling it. But before we get into that, I mean, it appears like you're a serial entrepreneur. I mean, you have started and built and sold in a couple of times, and now you're on to a new venture. What got you into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my father started his company when I was 4 years old and owned his own. I mean, he at most it was two people, so kept it always small and independent. But for me, I think it's just it was normal. The rest of my friends at school, everybody, their parents went to work and and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't understand that it wasn't normal, I guess, to have your own company. And my dad worked at home and, all those kinds of things. So, from an early age, it just, it seemed normal. And then, I right out of college, I worked for had a couple day jobs, but quickly, my second job out of college, I worked at a tech startup back in the early, the original internet boom, like 2001. Had a good time, but got laid off with 40 of my closest coworkers on the same day, and just kind of decided I didn't want to do that again. Like, I didn't want to go back and put myself in that situation. Since then, I have worked for another company, at one point, but I went on, I freelanced at first, and then I started my agency, Carousel 30, shortly after that.
That's awesome. What did your dad do, out of curiosity? Because working from home, sounds like it might have been pretty rare when you were growing up in such a young age.
Yeah, so he was an independent sales rep. So he also traveled a lot. So he was probably gone as much as he was at home working. But at the same time, yeah, he had a home office and stuff. And again, so that I grew up with that being completely normal. And to your point, it's a bit novel. I mean, not these days, but it was a bit novel 2 years ago, even to do that so much. So yeah. Well,
good. Well, so let's talk about the firm that you built and sold, Carousel. What did you do? What got you into that business? And then I want to dive into, you got to a point where you decided maybe an acquisition was a good path to growing it a bit, and then you grew it and sold it. But let's start off first with, what did that business do, and what got you to the point where you thought an acquisition would be a good path to growth?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that company. So over the course of about 14 years, I owned it. So through that time, number of twists and turns. But so what got me into it was, so I got laid off from the startup. I started freelancing, made some really good connections at the startup, and so had a few jobs or gigs, just kind of right after that, and got busy enough that I got to this point where either I was so busy, either I had to start turning down clients, or I had to find a way to get more work done. And so I ended up partnering with a few other folks and starting the company. And so it was four of us that co-founded it originally. About a year and a half into that, for various personal reasons, those three partners went their separate ways, and I just decided that it made sense for me to take over sole ownership, and just kind of keep it going. I saw enough potential there. And so really for a brief time, this was like 2006, 2007, it was me outsourcing to a lot of other companies. So we built the company. We're doing well on revenue and everything, but it was really just kind of me and a few other part-time people plus a bunch of subcontractors.
And you were doing web development, right? And you were specifically in the finance industry, is that right? You were doing some mission critical apps.
We ended up in the finance industry. Yeah, it started out a little more broadly, a little more broad, but in the website design and development space, which at that time was becoming a mature thing, but it was kind of early days for a mature web design and development company even. But so a year and a half in, I was just kind of managing these external vendors, and one of the vendors I ended up working with, I would say about 75% of the time. I mean, they're the owner of the company, was in most meetings with me. His team was doing most of, I would say about 75% of the work. And so I was just like, what, instead of outsourcing and trying to calculate, all of this stuff, let's just, essentially let's merge company. It was an acquisition, but, let's just merge teams and everything like that and become one company. And so, at that point we grew from technically one person, me plus outsourcing, to about 7 people, because, their team had about 6. Plus some other external vendors. So, that took us into, and so, I acquired them in mid 2008, which, a few months later, some interesting things happened in the economy, but I wasn't into financial predictions at that point in my career, but again, it made perfect sense to do that. And, given how much money I was basically giving them anyway. So it made, and we got together, we got along well, and, there was good.
So the owner stayed with the business going forward. And did he have an ownership percentage, or did he just sell out to you and you owned 100%?
So I gave him an ownership percentage as part of the acquisition. Yeah. And then, eventually about a year and a half later, his second in command basically got, some percentage as well, ownership.
Great.
Yeah.
So tell me, what was that experience like? How did you get to value, and what was the integration like after you had agreed to value and wrapped up the deal? What was it like integrating and merging the two firms together?
Yeah, so I think I will say the first time this happened, I mean, when I sold my company, there was a lot more due diligence and everything like that. I would say, I mean, I'll be honest, I compared to now, I was a kid. And so I think we did things maybe not as sophisticated as we should have. I mean, all's well that ends well, but we got some lawyers involved as we could and all that, but came to terms pretty quickly. I mean, again, the relationship was so good that everybody kind of felt comfortable moving quickly. And again, the next time that happened, there was a lot more due diligence. I I learned a few things. Again, I didn't have a bad experience, but I learned that I should have spent twice as much time thinking through some things. And I feel like maybe I gave too much equity away as part of the.
So can we talk a little bit about that? Can you share with the M&A Unplugged community, what did you learn that first time around that now in the future you would do differently? Because I think that's what this show is all about, making sure people don't fall into those pitfalls. So what is it you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, a lot more financial due diligence, even though, the companies at that point weren't huge companies by any means. I would have done more financial due diligence. I was at a point in my career where I didn't actually, now I feel like I know a lot better what I don't know. And so, the first thing that I would do is get a financial, advisor in, and, I have an M&A person on call at this point in my life. So it's like, that's a pretty key thing to do if you're in the space at all. But at that point, I had a lawyer, and I had them look over terms. I dug around a little bit. I asked I asked a few people to help out, but really, wasn't.
What was it in the financials? What was it in the financials that if you were to do it again, you would have done differently? What did you find? What did you realize later on that would have changed the course maybe of the transaction?
Yeah, I think it's, revenue was exactly as I thought that it would be. It's just, a better understanding of costs and profit. So, and again, you can look at a P&L statement and all that stuff. And certainly I know how to read those things a lot better than I did, right, a decade or so ago. But just kind of really sitting with the idea of, okay, well, what's it actually like month 3 of this? Let's say things don't go swimmingly. Like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to be saddled with if, let's say it goes, not even terribly, let's say it goes below average expectation. What are the risks, and what are some of the things that I need to keep in mind? Do I need a line of credit? Do I need all of those types of things? I mean, again, early days, it was a self-funded company, and, we didn't have access to lots of equity and all those kinds of things. So we were getting by, and there was enough money in that work that, money was continually flowing in. Right. But it's just, again, a few months later was the, 2008 financial crisis happened to us, and, we obviously survived it, but it's like, I wish I would have thought a few months out and had someone to help me kind of think through a few months out.
So I'm curious, if the crisis hadn't have hit, would you feel the same way, or was it the crisis that, in the rearview mirror, had you rethinking the transaction?
I still would think the same way of, you can never, I mean, there's a point where you can prepare too much because it simply takes lawyers and accountants too much time and they bill you for it, but you can't really be too prepared for anything like this. And, you gotta know where all the things are buried and so on and so forth. So, I should have spent more time regardless. And, the financial crisis just, for better or worse, it affected everybody in the industry, and we ended up benefiting in a sort of tangential way to that anyway, just because our competitors went out of business. And
well, I think your point is so well taken. In fact, we're going to do a series in the new year around diligence because it's such an important topic. People don't spend enough time. They don't know what they don't know. Certainly one of these areas where bringing in specialists and people who really understand how to do forensic accounting, but it goes well beyond the numbers in the financials. There's so many other things that need to be contemplated in diligence. And like I said, we're going to do a couple of episodes in early 2021 around diligence and try to help better educate people on what's involved here. So getting past the financial piece of it, how was the integration? I know you were small firms, so there weren't a lot of moving pieces, but how did integration go? Cultural fits, were there things that had to be worked out?
Yeah, I mean, culture, fortunately, it worked out really well because we had a working relationship. I had a working relationship with everyone. I mean, you know, to your point, it was a small team. So
Yeah.
I literally knew everyone and had some kind of interaction already with them. So, you know, me as CEO it wasn't a weird thing to them or anything like that. From a like back office support and all those kinds of things. I mean, because I was a one-man show, managing other vendors and stuff like that, it was easy. And I mean, there was some systems that, you know, we used one accounting system, they used another, but, you know, so there were some things like that we needed to do. But I think it was less, there was much more that needed to be integrated like that when I sold the agency, once it was a lot larger and just more complex. So, you know, at that point it was relatively seamless, you know, from that standpoint.
So you guys went on to go ahead and build a pretty decent sized practice over the the next 8 years or 6, 7 years, something like that?
Yeah. So from 2009, 2008, 2009 to 2014. So yeah, about five years or so. Yeah.
Okay. So you built the practice up, and then did you take the business to market? Did you hire an M&A advisor and take it to market at that point in time?
Yeah. So what I did was, and actually I misspoke. So it was 2016 when it sold. So I bought my other partners out in 2014. So I made a decision.
Did they leave the business? You buy them out and they left the business?
Yeah. They both, one had left a little bit prior just for some personal reasons, moved out of the area. The other one I bought out. So both of them were out of the business. I just, you know, that came down to simply me wanting to grow or, you know, do something bigger with the company, and the others just, you know, being okay with things as they were, and nothing wrong with either approach. It was just a difference of philosophy. So, you know, 2014, I did that. And then immediately, so I at that point, I'd been focusing more on very specific parts of the business. So I was doing sales and I was doing some strategy work, but I had not been really key in the operations, finance, anything like that. One of my partners had been doing all of that. And so trying to learn from, you know, the past, the very first thing that I did as I was buying the other partners out was I hired a fractional CFO who doubled as an M&A advisor, because I knew that at the time my goal was to acquire more companies and grow that way. I hadn't quite made the decision to sell, or, you know, that came a little bit later after kind of reviewing the market and everything like that. But I knew that immediately I needed to have a very good understanding, one that I had never had before, of the finances of like literally everything going on. Like I was the sole CEO and sole executive at that company at that point, and the sole owner, I guess you could say, at that company. And I just wanted to have a better understanding of all these things that, you know, to be honest, I never took the time to learn as a designer and marketing person, you know, out of college and all that kind of stuff. I just never took the time to learn. And I realized, you know what, if I'm going to own a company, I don't need to be, an economist, but I need to understand how everyone does their job, and I need to understand how a business actually works. And so, you know, hired somebody to do that, brought in a good operations person to help me day to day, you know, kind of like managing director type to run the business. And then was solely focused on the metrics of, you know, we've got to be more profitable, get utilization in the right place, all of those types of things to either acquire or be acquired. And it ended up just making more sense to be acquired.
Got it. So you packaged up the business, you took it to market. Tell me what that experience was like, and what did you learn in that process? Now, so you had acquiring a business under your belt, and now this was your first time actually selling one, correct?
Yeah. So fortunately, it was kind of a lengthy process of doing that, because, you know, from 2014 to it was early 2017 when I made the decision that, you know, it makes, given certain things going on in the market and everything, it made sense to sell. So but I'd really been working, for the past 2 years plus almost in getting the company in a place where it was attractive. So either I was going to have to get money to buy a company, or I was going to, again, sell. So all the papers were in order, all of those things. And, I think the biggest thing for me, I mean, again, I come from a creative and marketing field, and there's a lot of things that you worry about from a branding and marketing perspective that are definitely important. And I think the brand that we built was an important aspect of selling, but there are so many other things that the finance people are going to look at that, when they're buying a company versus, is the logo recognizable, and is their portfolio as up to date as it could be? Again, things that are critical for some things, but really they want to see, am I going to make money off this? At the end of the day, am I going to make money off this transaction? So, teaching myself to think that way when it didn't come naturally or by training was, it was good. I mean, I take that with me, wherever I go now.
So what were the things that you did preparing? What were the big things that you did that you felt really moved the needle for you on being able to sell the business more easily, or maybe increased value?
Yeah, I mean, I think the understanding how, so we were primarily, we're a consulting company at the end of the day. So, we had people working hours performing, sometimes it was fixed price projects, sometimes it was time and materials, but understanding utilization rates. And, when we started the business, it was just like, okay, well, how much does a website cost? I don't know. Like, will they pay 20 grand or 50 grand or 100 grand? If they will, yeah, we'll take it. That was very, very early days. I mean, as the business went on, we, started becoming more sophisticated, but it came down, even further of individuals' utilization and how profitable is each person on the team. If we had, if we got acquired, would we have, and we cut people, which people would we recommend? What contracts are most valuable? What types of so you mentioned, we made a move into financial services as a sector. That was because our financial services projects were much more profitable than our nonprofit work. And so it was a no-brainer. Okay, let's shift more sales and marketing efforts into getting more financial services for many reasons. It was more profitable, and once you get a few of those, once you focus on a sector, it becomes easier to get more of those. So, I guess those are a few things at least that really helped.
So it sounds like you got your arms around what your metrics were, what made sense, so that somebody had a blueprint on how to grow profitably going forward.
Yeah.
So, what was your experience like actually taking the business out to market and selling it? How long did it take? What did you learn along the way?
Yeah. So, it didn't take so long because I guess there were a few seeds planted along the way, and so I was pretty connected in the marketing industry in Washington D.C. where the company's based and where I'm based. So we had actually had an offer a couple of years prior, almost right after I bought my other partners out. I'd gotten an offer to acquire us, and at the time I was just like, you know what, I want to grow this myself, and thanks, but at the same time, like anyone should do, I'm not going to burn bridges, and so I kept in touch with them. They weren't the only suitor, so to speak, but they ended up being the ones that acquired us because there was just a very good relationship. We built a rapport over a few years of just talking on and off and stuff. But it came down. There were about 3 companies that were serious. There were 2 that were a little more serious, and then the one ended up acquiring. But I would say it's a relatively small town where where marketing and advertising agencies are concerned in DC, and so it was pretty easy to find a short list of potential buyers, knowing kind of where everybody's at in their growth cycle and everything. So yeah, I mean, all said and done, I mean, I would say about 6 months we were probably, but I will say that's because we were very, very prepared and very, I've heard from other people that I know other people that have been trying to sell their company for, for much longer than that. I just don't think they were as prepared and didn't have, as good, let's call it representation and just sort of consulting along the way.
Got it. Got it. So you really spent the time ahead of time to be prepared, which is something we talk about all the time on M&A Unplugged, is that it's so critical to get ahead of the curve well in advance of wanting to go to market. Understand your key metrics, put the business in a position where it can easily be transferred to a new owner. So I'm curious, I'm going to ask the question a slightly different way. You've gone off and you've now founded a new company, which is in the poster behind you, CareerGig. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But if you get to the point sometime in the future where you look to sell CareerGig, what did you learn from the first time around that you'll do differently with CareerGig?
Yeah, great question. I guess just focusing more on creating value, and ahead of time. I mean, that's, it's hard to say. I mean, there's so many things that I have learned that I'm trying to apply. So it's like, right. Some of it I may still be kind of processing, even though the last company was acquired 3 years ago. But I just think the difference, I guess, with this one is it's a very different business model too. Uh-huh. So it's also just kind of understanding what's going to be the most valuable. Selling a consulting firm versus CareerGig is a SaaS platform. So, selling a product company, vastly different. One of those I would need to study up more on, again, what are the triggers and what are the, what are the points where people are going to find most value in that. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about CareerGig. What is it? What got you to the point where you founded CareerGig?
Yeah, sure. So, after I sold Carousel 30, I joined the company that, so we were part of a roll up. So there was 3 other companies rolled us up, and joined them for about 1.5 years and then went my way.
And was that the plan? Was that the thought? You were going to stick around for a while and then transition out? Got it.
Yeah, I stayed on to transition my team over, and most of my team went over as part of the acquisition, and just wanted to, and clients and stuff, wanted to keep everything smooth as possible. And then the plan was always for me to exit. So was your deal an earn-out deal, or did you get paid the majority of the purchase price at the closing table? It was a combination. So
it was.
there was a little bit of each. And so, that's another reason I wanted to stay on, was so I could, get those contracts signed and all that stuff.
So you had an incentive to stick around, make sure the company met the metrics. And did it meet all the metrics? Did you get what was a near full payout?
It met most of them. Well, I'll just put it that way. Yeah. Short on a couple, but met the other ones. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, and maybe that's a topic of a whole other podcast is motivation after a sale, but because it's certainly, I was side by side with 2 other, business owners that sold to the same company. And so that was an interesting, little focus group or group therapy.
And did you all have similar deal structures?
Yeah, we did. I mean, there were different sizes of companies. Sure. So, one was a lot larger than my company, and one was about the same size, but about the same deal structure. So we were all incentivized to stay on and keep the customers happy, keep the team happy, and everything like that.
Yep. Got it.
But yeah, after doing that, I just kind of made a decision that I'd done marketing and really, consulting to an extent for a while, and maybe some point I'll go back to it, but got involved a little bit more in some other related things. So I got more involved in customer experience, which kind of led me to employee experience and leadership development, organizational change, and so got really involved in the future of work and work transformation and stuff like that. And so that just kind of led me to understand and appreciate just how quickly the freelance economy is growing, which led me to then start CareerGig, which is really about connecting freelancers in a community that also connects them to paying gigs as well as benefits that you'd normally get at a full-time job. So we provide insurance benefits and access to retirement and all those kinds of things. So kind of making up for what you give up. You gain a lot by being a freelancer. You gain freedom and flexibility and all that stuff, but you give up some things. Yes. Like, the reason why people get full-time jobs is for those benefits and perks and stability. So for us to be able to make up some of that gap or all of that gap, ideally, is really our goal and our mission. And so, yeah,
is that a unique thing to your platform? Because I have to admit, I haven't heard a lot of scenarios where freelance networkers or networks are offering benefits to the freelancers. It seems to be a pretty rare situation.
It's there's a few that provide some of what we offer, but really, I mean, we offer insurance in all 50 states. So right now we're solely targeted on the US market.
Yes.
We offer insurance, we're licensed in all 50 states. We offer guaranteed issue insurance. So, you can get healthcare through ACA, but you can't get life insurance and disability and all those other things. And particularly as an independent, getting that guaranteed issue, like no questions asked, as long as you work a set amount of hours through our platform, is pretty, that is not being done.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And what types of jobs? Is it across the board? Everything you can imagine?
We have a lot of diverse types of jobs, but the main ones that we focus on, so a freelancer can sign up if you have your own customers and everything like that. You can sign up, you can do literally anything. There's nothing, there's nothing really stopping you. But the roles that we really try to specialize in placing people in and connecting are in the technology space. So, anything from cybersecurity, data science, software engineers, the marketing space. So this would be anything from design to marketing and advertising to writing, or the healthcare space. So things like nurses and home health aides and stuff like that. And so the industries aren't so much, I mean, other than healthcare, which is kind of an industry unto itself, industries aren't so important as the roles that, either the tech or the marketing roles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. I think that's a tremendous benefit. And I wish you nothing but the best there. I love to hear that a platform is offering benefits to freelancers, because that's one of the biggest issues freelancers have is securing benefits, taking care of themselves and their families. So that's awesome.
Great. Yeah, no, it's good. It's exciting. Have a lot of interest in it. So, we feel like we've hit on something. So yeah.
Well, Greg, I love your story. I love that you've bought and sold and you're now starting again and building. To bring everything full circle, if you were to offer any advice to owners who are looking to grow through acquisition or then, prepare to sell, if you were to put a bow on the conversation, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, I mean, definitely do your homework, which is not even just do your homework on your or on the potential, acquisition or anything like that, but also, I mean, I will say the help that I received from really smart people that do this day in and day out. I know you do this as well. It's like from, the firm, the M&A person that I worked with, was incredibly helpful from the start, but it required me being very forthcoming about what I did and didn't want, because I think with anything, it's, there's a lot of things that seem like, oh, wouldn't it be easier to XYZ, wouldn't it be easier to just buy a company versus organically grow? Well, maybe, but it also, when you're getting help from experts, which I highly recommend, make sure that you're really honest about, okay, what does a bad deal look like as well, not just a good deal, because, again, I learned a lot. You learn a lot about what you don't want to do in the future as well, as much as what you do want to replicate. So
just as important what you don't want to do versus what you do want to do, right? So yeah, I think that's great advice. Greg, if folks wanted to get in touch with you in regards to CareerGig, or they had a question about this interview, how could they reach you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm really active on LinkedIn. So I recommend just, mention you saw me on this podcast and, reach out. I'm happy to connect with you, and, definitely check out careergig.com. We serve both freelancers and companies that hire contractors. So almost something for everybody.
and spell your name for everybody. It'll be in the show notes, but just so everybody has your name.
Sure. It's Greg, Greg, Kihlstrom, Kihlstrom.
All right. Awesome. Greg, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Really, really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please remember to subscribe and review our podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.